Yanajana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadha Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Sri Raghavan Chandrika. So we left off Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur speaking about the relationship of Krishna to his Aishwarya and Madhurya aspects, having elaborated on the devotee's relationship with those aspects. The last thing that we were discussing, he referenced the verse from Queen Kunti's prayers, where she expresses her bewilderment that Krishna, although himself, the cause of fear, for fear personified, is himself afraid of Jasoda. Her referring to Krishna as the cause of fear for fear personified means that she's aware, she has Aishwarya again. She's aware that Krishna is in fact the Godhead himself, but that he's bewildered by his mother genuinely is what's causing her to be bewildered. How can someone who has Aishwarya Gyan, how can someone, who's for her, because of her awareness of the Lord's Aishwarya, it's bewildering to her how he could apparently not be aware of his Aishwarya and therefore be afraid of his mother. If some Vaishnava explains that actually he was not afraid, he was only pretending, then that would not be a cause of bewilderment for Queen Kunti. So her bewilderment is with the fact that she's aware of his Aishwarya and that the Lord isn't aware of his Aishwarya, apparently so at least. And that absence of awareness is what's facilitating his bewilderment by his own mother. And so that's bewildering her. So Krishna's Aishwarya is not, we won't even say not manifest, it's not even there. And so the question is being explored, and this is where we left off yesterday. The question is being explored, what is powerful enough to eclipse the Lord's Aishwarya? So, in developing his point about that, he describes that just as the jivas are themselves bewildered by regular ignorance, I'm looking for a word that's the opposite of divine, but whatever. Just as they are bewildered by regular ignorance, and therefore, identify with the material, their self-awareness is eclipsed and they identify with the material body. So also the Supreme Lord is eclipsed, the associates of the Supreme Lord and his pastimes, they enjoy a divine ignorance, which allows them to relish Krishna Lila. That was the last point that we heard. So we suffer our regular ignorance, which causes us to get attached and suffer in the material world. And they enjoy, Krishna's associates, a divine ignorance, which facilitates their relishment of rasa and the divine lila. So like that, he wants to evolve the point, because remember, we're answering the question about Krishna. So let me share my screen now. What is powerful enough to eclipse Krishna's Aishwarya? That is a question that has been explored. And oh my God, where did I have put it? Okay, yeah, I think it's here. Okay, I hope you all can see that clearly. Make sure I can see it clearly. Okay, so similarly, I think this is where we left off. I'll just reread the previous statement and just for continuity of flow. So we see that ignorance, avidya, as a function of the illusory potency, throws all living entities into the bondage of the material world and veils the knowledge of their constitutional position to make them experience only suffering, right? In the same way, the embodiment of the function of the spiritual potency, Chit Shakti, that is the pastime potency, Lila Shakti, or Yoga Maya, covers the knowledge of Sri Krishna's associates, such as Mother Yasoda, who are beyond the three modes of nature. This enables them to taste the mellows of the happiness of Sri Krishna's supremely sweet pastimes. Okay, so similarly, the essence of Chit Shakti, namely prema, also covers Sri Krishna's own knowledge of his nature, that he is the very personification of divine pleasure itself, Ananda Swarup, to enable him to relish a greater abundance of ecstasy. So just as the associates are enjoying a divine ignorance that allows for the relishment of rasa, so also the essence of the Chit Shakti, which is called prema, eclipses the Lord's Aishwarya, Gyan, of his own nature, allowing him the relishment of rasa. So prema is also Krishna's internal intrinsic potency, Swarupa Shakti. Therefore, there is no fault in its covering his identity. Okay, so he wants to elaborate on this point. How is it not a fault that Krishna is Aishwarya Gyan is eclipsed by prema? Well, his first point is that because it's essentially of him. It's not outside of him, unlike the Maya Shakti. Right? The Maya Shakti is not part of his Swarupa. We know the example, I've mentioned it many times. It is like the reflection of sunlight in water. So the reflection of sunlight in water exists outside of the sun. It does not exist inside of the sun, right? And it is seen when the sun is not seen. So also that is Maya's relationship with Krishna. It doesn't exist in Krishna's Swarup, it exists outside of his Swarup, and it is seen when Krishna isn't seen. That is the definition of Maya. So it would be a fault if this energy was outside of Krishna's Swarup, but this is part of Krishna's Swarup. It's called Swarup Shakti. So there's no fault that the essence of the Swarup Shakti, known as prema, is having this capacity. But he wants to give further examples, so he continues his explanation. So ignorance binds living entities by its tendency to create attachment, right? And thereby afflicts agony upon them. Yes, we know it well. Criminals are bound by ropes and chains, causing them to experience suffering, whereas respectable people find great satisfaction in adorning themselves with pleasing, costly, fragrant, fine cloths, like kurtas and turbans, which also constitute a type of bondage. Similarly, the conditioned souls bound by ignorance experience only misery in the state of bondage, whereas Krishna becomes happy under the control of prema. Krishna savors great joy in being bound by love, just as the bumblebee feels happy in being enclosed in the whorl. Is that how you say that? I always ask how to say this whorl. It looks like whorl to me, is whorl of a lotus flower. Therefore it is said, O Lord, you do not leave the lotus-like hearts of your devotees. That's from Brahmastuti to Garbhodakshay Vishnu in 395. And devotees have bound your lotus feet with the ropes of love. That's from the 11th canto, chapter 2, verse 55. Shall we look at those verses? I didn't actually prepare these verses for the class. I would have done better to do so. But these are actually really sweet verses, so let's look them up. 395. Hold on, I'm looking up on my phone, so I don't have to. Yeah, so this is what 395 says. Oh my Lord, persons who smell the aroma of your lotus feet. Okay, try to visualize this. Persons who smell the aroma of your lotus feet, carried by the air of Vedic sound through the holes of their ears, So the ears are being compared to the nose that's doing the smelling. And the scent is coming from the sounds of the Vedas, right? And so one is hearing very nicely and he's catching the scent. What is the scent? The lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. So those who would do that, they accept your devotional service. So that means they've understood the actual import of Shastra. Just as Brahma, he studied Shastra 3 times, first time came to the conclusion of Karma Khan, second time, Jnana Khan, third time, Reti. Reti is the essence of Shastra. So those who are smelling the scent of the Lord's feet, that means coming to the proper Siddhanta of scripture through their ears, then they accept bhakti or rati, pure bhakti as the Siddhanta or conclusion of Shastra. Then he says, for them, so for those who come to this conclusion and embrace it, for them, you are never separated from the lotus of their hearts. Wow, very sweet imagery there. Let's look at 11th Canto, chapter 2, verse 55. This is a verse I'm often fond of quoting. Pranaya shanaya tangri patma sabhavati bhagavata pradana uptaha. So let's look at the whole verse though. I'm just reading the translation here. It says here, the Supreme Lord is so kind to the conditioned souls that if they call upon him by speaking his holy name, even unintentionally or unwillingly, the Lord is inclined to destroy innumerable sinful reactions in their hearts. Wow. Therefore, when a devotee who has taken shelter of the Lord's lotus feet chants the holy name of Krishna with genuine love, the Supreme Lord can never give up the heart of such a devotee. One who has thus captured the Supreme Lord within his heart with the ropes of love, pranaya rashanaya means the rope of love, then they are known as the Bhagavat Pradana, the chief devotee, the most exalted devotee of the Lord. So the imagery that Sri Krishna is providing for us here in this paragraph is that one can be bound up by chains and ropes, and that's very miserable. But there can be another type of bondage that's very pleasing. So he gives the example like people binding themselves up with decorative clothing, which is also another type of bondage, but they derive happiness from that bondage. He gives another example of the bumblebee who is so intoxicated by the sweet scent of the lotus flower that he will lay inside the lotus flower. And at nighttime, the lotus flower will close. And even if he also has the ability to just like fly right through the lotus flower, but he never does it because he is so lost in the ecstasy of the scent of the lotus flower. I don't know if that kills him or not. Does anyone know if that actually can kill does he die inside the lotus? I don't know. But the sense is there that he's so intoxicated, he's literally bound up by the scent of the lotus flower, but he relishes that bondage. So similarly, the bondage of the conditioned souls is very miserable, that we already know by direct experience. Whereas to be bound by the ropes of prema is very pleasing. It's pleasing for the bhakta and is also very pleasing for Krishna, right? So that is his. And what is the proof of the pleasure of this bondage? And so these 2 verses from Bhagavatam are quoted. Pranaya rashanaya dirtangri padma. That's a very nice verse because the verse literally says his feet are tied by the ropes of love. So the imagery is very much an image of being bound by the ropes of love. And that verse, particularly 11-55, is explaining why the Satya Bhaktas are constantly able to remember Krishna. We also want to remember Krishna at every step, right? Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, he inquires, how do I remember you at the time of death, right? And Krishna says, Tasma sarveshu kaleshu mama nusmara yudhyacha. Why only at the time of death you remember me? That will not be possible. You should remember me at all times, sarveshu kaleshu. At all times you remember me. Then it will be possible for you to remember me at the time of death, not otherwise. This verse is following the principle Yam Yam Bhapismaram Bhavam, Jaya Jante Kalevaram, Tatarivaitu Konteya, Sadata Bhava Bhavita. Because of all your mind always been infused in that bhava. Tat bhava means that bhava that you're always remembering. So naturally at the time of death, you'll remember that. And then you'll attain to that reality, whatever it is. So therefore, tasmat, therefore, sarveshu kaleshu, at all times, mama nusmana, you should remember me. So it becomes possible. For the sadhakas, it is our practice, right? Smartavya satatam Vishnu, vismartavya najatuche sarvavedi nishedasur. For us, either it's our vidhi, always remember Krishna and never forget him. It is our vidhi and nisheda. Or else, if you're on the path of Ragmark, which is what this book is discussing, that is your practice, Krishna smaram janam chasya, Krishna nijasamihita. So whether it's your vidhi or it's your lobha, that is our practice, that sort of remembrance of Krishna. But for the Sadhya Bhaktas, it is very easy to remember. It is not a practice. Why is it very easy? Pranaya rashanaya tritam tripadma. Because they've bound Krishna's feet with the ropes of love. So he can't escape their minds, which is like the prison cell, so to speak, where he's bound up and he can't make any escape. So this is the evidence that's for Sri Vishnu is offering, the pramana, that this bondage is giving pleasure to Krishna, and another type of bondage gives suffering to the conditioned souls. So there's two types of Maya. One Maya giving the suffering, and then one Maya, Yoga Maya, which is the essence of Chit Shakti in the form of prema. That is also binding and is giving happiness. So he gives this analogy. So this is, again, this is answering the question, what is powerful enough to eclipse the Aishwarya awareness in Bhagavan? So the answer is prema. Well, isn't that problematic? Nope, it's very wonderful, it's very pleasurable. Okay, continuing on here. In this world, the extent to which one's knowledge is covered depends on the degree of one's ignorance. And accordingly, one will experience 5 kinds of misery, kleshas. I guess he favors this, the 5 kleshas from Yoga Sutra, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, vinivesha. Also, the extent to which one's knowledge is covered depends on the degree of one's ignorance. Sri Krishna offers a nice analogy of this in Bhagavad Gita also, right? As the fire is covered by smoke, as the mirror is covered by the dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb. So the living entity is covered by different degrees of kama, which this verse is basically equating kama to avidya there. So the covering can be slight, comprehensive, or severe, right? Avritam jnana metena ganina nityaverina. So the knowledge of the knowing one is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of kama, which burns like fire and which is never satisfied. So this covering it produces a state of klesha or misery. So 5 types are mentioned there. So that's already in it. So to the extent one's knowledge is covered by ignorance, we suffer. Okay. Similarly, various degrees of prema suppress the knowledge and opulence of both the object, vishaya, and receptacle, ashraya, of prema, enabling them to taste the happiness of unlimited varieties of rasa according to the level of their love. Very nice. In the exchange of love, there's an object of love and the subject of love. So the object of love is called the vishaya. That means the person at whom love is directed. And the subject of love, called as the ashraya, is the one in whom the love is located. That's why the word ashraya is used. So ashraya refers to the bhakta, vishaya refers to Krishna generally. Although from Krishna's perspective, the devotee is the vishaya and Krishna is the ashraya. So according to the degree of prema, there will be a degree of eclipsing of, again, Aishwarya Gyan. And that allows for the pleasurable experience of that exchange, which is called this rasa. So, and his devotees like Vasudev and Devaki, they also have prema, but their prema is a little bit less. So the Aishwarya Gyan is still quite active there. Whereas the Brijvasis, their prema very strong. So the Aishwarya Gyan is completely suppressed and it's just pure Madhurya. Then even within that category, you have the gopis, and even within the gopis, there's degrees of prema, sneha, man, pranaya, raga, anuraga, mahabhava. So the more high the prema, the more relishable the experience of rasa. So prema is doing this to both the vishaya and ashraya. And just like we suffer according to the degree of our ignorance, whether it's slight, comprehensive, or severe, so also conversely, the bhakta is able to relish rasa with Krishna according to the degree of love. So it's very wonderful. Clear. Next sentence, thus the love of Mother Jasoda and other Brajvasis, the ashraya of prema, binds their vishaya, Krishna, with the ropes of possessiveness, and vice versa. Right. By their mutual love, vishaya and ashraya bring one another under control, thus showering an excess of joy upon both. On the other hand, the prema that is mixed with awareness of the Lord's great opulence found in Vasudev, Devaki, and other residents of Mathura and Dwarka is not capable of bestowing such happiness upon Sri Krishna and his devotees. Of course, honestly speaking, even that experience is beyond anything that we can comprehend abstractly, honestly. Even Brahmananda, technically speaking, is beyond anything we can comprehend with our material faculties. What then to speak of prema? What then to speak of the heights of prema? But this gradation is given to sadhakas in order to keep us enthusiastic for the purpose of the Gaudiya Vaishnava. The Gaudiya Vaishnava. So what I'm looking for, I'm thinking institution, but I'm thinking soft institution, not like the buildings and so on, but like the philosophy. Our goal is Krishna Prema. So downplaying these other forms is part of creating that ananya bhak, that ananya manaso, that mind that knows no other conception, no other reality. Okay, continuing on here. So Sri Krishna is so captivated by the parental love of Brajeshri Jasoda and other gopis that he is not aware that he is the Supreme Lord. When disturbances from demons and forest fires occur, whatever omniscience is seen in Sri Krishna is only to protect his devotees. One should understand that his pastime potency, Lila Shakti, causes him to momentarily display his omniscience. Furthermore, whatever omniscience is present at the time of Krishna's mugdata is simply to allow him to accept the service rendered by sadhakas. This omniscience also is instilled in him by his inconceivable potency, as previously established. So he's come kind of full circle, because remember this whole Dvitiya Prakasha, this second illumination has begun with the question, who hears the prayers of the Raganuga sadhakas? If Krishna is lost in the drama of love, therefore has no awareness even of his Aishwarya and so on, who's going to be there to hear the prayers of the sadhakas? And so, this whole second illumination was, in one sense, it's at least opening with the need to satisfy that question. You can't say Paramatma does it because that will break the hearts of the sadhakas. Krishna's not really hearing me. And so the whole explanation was developed on the strength of Krishna is both, in all his forms, the repository of both omniscience and mugdata, a sort of childlike unawareness. So in this last sentence, it has come full circle, that Krishna is always mugdata and his Madhurya Leelas. But when he is demonstrating his position as, Shadaishwarya, Purna, Bhagavan, That is due to the Lila Shakti. And it is also informed by his desire to love his devotees in the form of offering them protection from some calamity or whatever. So in the same way, although Krishna is primarily, Mugdata and his Lila, by his Achintya Shakti, his omniscience is still present. And it facilitates his receiving the prayers of Raganuga Sadakas, despite his being lost in the drama of love. So he's come full circle to explain all these sort of subtleties. And closing it out with this, he writes, in this way, I've expounded a philosophical deliberation on Vidhi Marg and Rag Marg, the Lord's aspect of Aishwarya and Madhurya, and his devotees' awareness of these aspects, Aishwarya Gyan and Madhurya Gyan. I have also presented an elaborate analysis of the distinctions between Swakiya Bhava and Parikiya Bhava in Ananda Chandrika, my commentary on Rupa Goswami Pad's Ujjvala Nilamani. So I guess we're supposed to go and read that, but a little summary is given here, it seems, in this following statements. Ujjvala Nilamani is a book that I've not read just yet or studied. And Saraswati Thakur's line, we're largely discouraged from doing so. I guess probably until never, if we're being 100% chaste to how we've received the process of sadhana and Saraswati Thakur's line. But I'm gonna say until your loba, comes to the right mark. And by coming to the right mark, it means where your necessity and your awareness of your necessity cares for no law in that sense. As it is said, necessity knows no law. And I think that truism in application to what we're discussing here has an esoteric implication. If you accept necessity to be as loba, all jivas in this world, we have our necessity. You can talk about it in different ways, but as self-realization or as God realization, there are different ways, as desire for wholeness, as we're feeling when you're in conditioned life, we suffer from what is called as the feeling of separateness, prithat bhava, right? So that feeling of separateness is like a disease of the soul. And so the desire to feel whole again, not separated from. There are different ways of talking about it. But most of the jivas, we are unaware of what our necessity is. So that unawareness of it, or maybe an intuition about it, but an apathy toward it, allows us to participate in the status quo without too much difficulty. But as soon as you become aware of your true necessity, then it just obliges you to break out of the constricting line of even all sorts of moralities, do this, do that. Just like, to give a mundane example, Romeo and Juliet, there was this constricting boundary line. You can't go and be with this family. Well, as they fell in love with each other, protagonists of the story. Not that I even remember the story so much, but we got the general image in our head. As they fall in love with the story, that love, that necessity for communion, knew no law. The law of the family, the law of the society, it knew no law. They crossed all lines and, of course, ended up dead for it. But that is a risk one is willing to take when they are aware of their true necessity. Then we can even risk death. And most movies that follow this hero's journey sort of template, it's the same idea. The hero of the story starts off in like a very comfortable place, and he or she even resists moving into the unknown world, which is full of chaos and dragons and the risk of death. But at a certain point, there's a necessity. Whether it's a necessity to save the land from plague or tyrants or this, that, and the other thing. And that awareness of the necessity obliges them to cross the threshold of law and enter into that chaotic world to face the demons and the dragons and the this and the that, and uncover their potential or die and trying to uncover it. So if you think of Loba as something like that, that's how I think of it. Loba is a type of necessity, the necessity for love, the necessity for Braj Bhav, that love specifically. So most of us may not have the necessity or don't, have it a little bit, but are largely apathetic to it. So that allows us to participate in material life without issue. But as soon as we become aware of that necessity and earnest, then no law will be able to contain you as such. That doesn't mean you are foolhardy and you don't take help from Shastra and Vaishnavas and gurus who can help you, but it means that your necessity is forcing you to act in ways that may even be questionable or repugnant to those who are still trapped in the boundary of status quo and, the moral standards therein. I'm remembering a verse that I'm trying to look up now. This is a verse from, I think it's attributed to Madhavendra Puri. The verse says this, very nice verse. Yeah, like this verse. Hold on. Mugdamam Nigadan to Nipuna, Brantam Ohur Vaidika. We should probably learn this verse. Mandam Bandava Sanchaya Jadudiyam, Muktadara Sodara, Unmatam Danino Viveka Chaturaka Ma Mahadambikam. Moktu Nakshamate Managapimano Govinda Padaspriham. I'm quoting this verse in the context of this probably protracted discussion on Lobo, but I guess I'm in a mood, so I'm just sharing it. Quote, let the sharp moralist accuse me of being illusioned. I do not mind. This is such a relevant statement today in light of even social politics. The sharp moralist, everyone moral grandstanding around each other. Let them accuse me of being illusioned. I do not mind. Experts in Vedic activities may slander me as being misled. Friends and relatives may call me frustrated. My brothers may call me a fool. The wealthy Mammonites may point me out as mad. And the learned philosophers may assert that I am much too proud. That sounds very familiar. Still, my mind does not budge an inch from the determination to serve the lotus feet of Govinda, though I be unable to do it. Such a nice verse in regard. So anyway, I'm saying all this in the context of reading Ujjvala Nilamani. It was a pretty esoteric book that deals with the details of the Madhurya Rasa, which Sri Rupa Goswami only touches on ever so briefly, and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, because of people's either not having an attraction to the Madhurya Rasa, or else being unable to appreciate the amative nature of the Madhurya Rasa for whatever cultural reasons and lack of purva samskaras that allows for that appreciation of that, or just for not being qualified. I forget, there's 3 reasons why he writes that he only touches on it in BRS, but then he expands it greatly in the Ujjvala Nilamani. So when can one study that book? So probably if you hear from most followers of Saraswati Thakur, never in this lifetime. I know one devotee whom I appreciate very much. He's fond of referencing Srila Sridhar Maharaj because Srila Sridhar Maharaj, of course, in the Saraswati Thakur's line, is one of the most respected and exalted Vaishnavas, loved by practically all the Sanghas. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj was asked one time, have you studied Ujjvala Nilamani? He was asked about Ujjvala Nilamani, basically. I don't know if he had read it or if he had studied it. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj basically responded that I've never read it. That was not what was asked of us from Saraswati Thakur. And that's become sort of the cultural standard around a book like Ujjvala Nilamani. So, and who are we, you know, Srila Sridhar Maharaj is just so exalted. So if you're coming forward and like, yeah, I read Ujjvala Nilamani, you know, even when this exalted Vaishnava is not read, then who are you? You will be made fun of for sure. So that's one side of the coin. And I'm also showing another side of the coin that if you develop genuine loba, then that's not going to stop you either. Just a sort of social sort of ethic that's become kind of imposed upon the community. So in any case, having said all that, was really long-winded. I definitely haven't read Ujjvala Nilamani just yet, but I did buy it and it's on my reading list. So what the discussion of Swakiya, which means like marital relationship, like the queens of Dwarka, and Parakiya means the paramour relationship, like the gopis of Vrindavan. So this dynamic is explained quite elaborately in Sri Vishwanath's commentary. But he's, I guess, presenting a summary herein of some important points at least. So let's see what he has to say. He says that although Srimati Radhika is Sri Krishna's own pleasure potency, and Krishna is also Radhika's very own Swakiya Jana, her own property, it is nonetheless one's perpetual duty to serve the divine couple, Radha Krishna Yugal, along with their pastimes, and not Krishna alone without his pastimes. None of the scriptures written by the sages has determined that Radha and Krishna of Braja are married. Therefore, Srimati Radhika, and both her manifest and unmanifest pastimes, Prakata and Apakrita Leelas, is attributed with having the mood of a paramour, not that of a wife. In this way, the essence of all topics has been briefly presented here in this text. So that's a pretty short summary. Probably going to need to read Ananda Chandrika to get a fuller explanation of everything. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next little section here. Let's see what time is it, 8:54. Oh my God. All right, let's see. We'll make a little bit more progress and try to finish this up tomorrow. It will now be described how a Raganuga devotee directly attains the desired goal by gradually advancing through the devotional stages of Anartana Vritti, the elimination of impediments, Nishta, resolute determination, Ruchi, strong taste, and Ashakti, deep attachment, and finally, ascension to the realm of Prema, divine love. So, yeah, this is a favorite sentence of those who would consider themselves the Raganuga Bhakti Saran apologist, if you will, because there has been such a taboo and also a sort of from what I understand so far, misrepresentation of the process of Raganuga Bhakti, where devotees are fond of saying it is not until you've accomplished Anartana Vritti and come to the stage of Nishta and then Ruchi thereafter that you have adhikar for pursuing the Rag Marg. So kind of in response to that line of thinking, which was popularized, especially in ISKCON, following a particular statement similar to this in Prabhupada's Nectar of Devotion. This sentence is quoted usually as a sort of pushback against that, because here the sentence is saying clearly that the Raganuga devotee moves through the stages of Anartana Vritti, Nishta, Ruchi, and Asakti. So not that you first have to go through these stages and then you have adhikar for Raganuga Bhakti, but rather you must have adhikar before that, and then you take up bhajan and then move through these stages. So this sentence is a fond one of quoting. I do feel that the issue is reconciled by the terms Ajataruchi Raganuga Sadhaka and Jataruchi Raganuga Sadhaka, because Ajira Goswami himself is writing in 310 Bhakti Sundarbha that when the loba is, you could say loba proper, and there's this absorption in bhakti without any interest in other things, which sounds pretty mature to me, you know, and the verse that he quotes from the third canto Bhagavatam is speaking to that reality. that the devotee is finding so much happiness in Harikatha that he's completely disinterested in other subject matters. So that sounds like something pretty elevated or mature. So, again, speaking to Prabhupada's point, after Narshana-vritti. But if you put in the Ajata Ruchi, Raganuga, then it seems like everything is kind of neatly reconciled. You have Loba as far as you're attracted to the idea of Vajrabhav, maybe attracted to a specific type of rasa, but you still got to do your work with Narshana-vritti and so on to kind of bring the Loba to its proper, pristine state, at which point you really qualify yourself for the application of the sadhana, specifically the meditational practices that are asked of us in the application of Raganuga sadhana, right? Seva Sattakarupena Sadarupena Chaturhi Tabhavalupsuna Karya Rajaloka Anusarita. And that way it seems I find this line of thinking very compelling. Perhaps with a little bit more information, I may change my stance or adjust it, but that seems pretty compelling to me. So in that way, all is reconciled in my head so far. Let's see, read on a little bit more here. Ujjvala Nilamani states, 349. Okay, so ta bhava padaraga ye janaste sadanirata ta yogyam anuragu kham prapyut karnta nusartah tarikasho tavadvitra kale kale prachebu bhavan. Those who were especially attracted to the moods of the Brijvasis performed sadhana bhajana by way of rag marg. Eventually, they attained a wealth of suitable fervor required for worship and spontaneous love. And in due time, according to their eagerness, they took birth in Braj Bhumi, either alone or in groups of 2 or 3. Describing the verse a little bit, the word anuragogha, this word here, and the verse above indicates appropriate eagerness from performing Raganuga bhajan. It does not refer to the intense attachment, anuraga, comprising one's permanent devotional sentiment, sthayi bhava, because there is no likelihood of this manifesting in the physical body of the sadhaka. So prema is a word that it's also a rubric term that refers to different degrees of love. So prema is like, technically speaking, rati or bhava is like the seed. And then when that rati becomes more condensed, it is called bhava. And then when it becomes more condensed, it's called sneha, and more condensed mana, pranaya, raga, anuraga, and then mahabhava. And then mahabhava has its different divisions also. So this condensation of prema cannot be held in the sadhaka rupa. The sadhaka rupa doesn't have the ability to sustain the condensation of these subsequent degrees of prema. I'm remembering something that's kind of funny. In Chicago Temple, one devotee there, we call him Deep Shiva Sharan. He was a Mayavadi through and through, but he really liked being with devotees, and he lived with us for a year. And at one point, he came and asked me about Mahaprabhu's prayer, Anandam Buddhivardhanam. And it says that the bliss is expanding, the ocean of bliss is ever expanding. So he said, I have a doubt about this. And immediately I could see the image in his head. So I just asked him, I said, you're just imagining the person and his body just explodes into, the ether. And he said, yes. He said, that's exactly what I'm thinking. It's like, the bliss is just so much, you just, boom, you just die. So with that in your image, yes, the condensation of the bliss of prema is not sustainable in the sadhaka rupa. So anyway, so he's saying quoting, the word anuraghoga, was that the word? Yeah. Anuraghogam. So this is referring to the loba suitable for performing the Raganuga bhajan. Okay. And then after that point, one other point. So the phrase took birth in Braja. So this is referring to the sadhakas. And this verse he's quoting from Ujjvala Nilamani. The phrase took birth in Braja means that the perfected sadhakas, so those who attain sadhya through Ragmarg, they took birth in the wombs of gopis, just as the eternally perfect Nityasiddha gopis appeared at the time of Krishna's descent. After that, the gopis who attained perfection through performing sadhana siddha gopis, gradually developed sneha, man, pranaya, raga, anuraga, bhava, and mahabhava, the highest stage of prema, by the influence of associating with, that is, by seeing directly, hearing about, and glorifying the Nityasiddha gopis who are endowed with the mahabhava, with that mahabhava. These moods cannot possibly have arisen in the sadhaka's previous material body. So here, the Rag Marg sadhaka, if he attains siddhi through that path, then he gets to take birth in Krishna's Prakata Lila. So we'll hear a little bit more about this just coming out. But the Lord's Lila is divided into the Prakata and Aprakata Lila, right? So the Aprakata Lila means the Lila in the spiritual world, where Nitya Lila is going on. And the Prakata Lila means that same Lila when it's here in the material domain, and where the Naimitika Lilas are also mixed up with the Nitya Lilas. So the Rag Marg Sadhaka who attains siddhi has to first take birth in the Prakata Lila. Why? Because in order to perfect his prema, which could not possibly been perfected in the Sadhaka Rupa, he needs to go through another training program, essentially. Again, because sneha, man, pranaya, and so on could not be experienced in the Sadhaka Rupa. And if you're in the Madhurya Rasa, remember the explanations here are in accordance with the Kamanuga type, especially. The prema of that bhava requires the condensation of Ananda to the especially if you're in the gopi camp, if you're after that bhava, all the way up to Mahabhava. But your Sadhaka Rupa was not able to sustain that level of bliss. And therefore you need training in the intricacies of that, the intricacies of those actions of love. So you take birth in the Prakata Lila and you get a chance to associate with the Nityasiddha gopis by seeing them, by hearing from them, by serving them and glorifying them. And that way you get further training in your own, and the sort of shaping of your own love and relationship to Krishna. Otherwise, these modes were not at all possible in the Sadhaka Rupa before attaining the Prakata Lila. There's some other extra point that's going on here, but we're going to pause here because this is a whole nother thing that's coming up. So we're going to make a little bit of a pause here because of the time factor and see if anyone wants to say anything. Okay, so we got a question here. The paragraph that we read about Raganuga Bhakta directly attains the goal by gradually advancing to the stages are mentioned. And you spoke about those who have adhikar for Raganuga. It was confusing when the word direct was used. It seemed that they don't have to go through a Narshnivriti. Their present life begins from Ruchi, like those who are born in Vaishnava families. So yeah, let me just scrolling back really quick. Yeah, so it will now be described how a Raganuga devotee directly attains the desired goal by gradually advancing through the devotional stages. Yes, Sakshat Swapishta Prapti Prakara Pradarshite. Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. I don't think directly is implying, because directly is certainly not implying that they don't have to go through these stages, because he says they have to go through these stages. I think directly is just meaning, yeah, I don't know exactly what is meant here by sakshat directly. Certainly these devotees, they're not necessarily starting from ruchi, because the verse is indicating they have to go through these stages of purification. So what may be indicated here, and this was also coming in the footnotes, which are based on, I think they're based, footnotes in this particular translation that we're reading. So the footnotes are based on lectures, I believe, of Srila Narayan Maharaj. And they offer the insight that this devotee has suitable previous samskara and present samskaras for the Raganuga Bhakti. As we heard earlier from Sri Vishwanath also, that samskaras for Ragmarg can be ancient or recent. So the person who has sufficient samskaras, then they will embrace the path and make rapid process and then directly attain. I don't know how to articulate the meaning of directly here, other than say that, yeah, you get the goal itself. You don't have to take shelter of Vidhi Marg, what then to speak of mixed bhakti, in order to attain a goal. You'll get the goal directly just by this path. So that's kind of the sense that I'm getting here from the use of the word directly. So you don't have to have ruchi, but having ancient or recent samskaras, which leads to the generation of loba, that is required. So that we've certainly heard already. And you'll get it directly. You don't have to. I'm trying to think about it as like, what is indirectly? So by taking shelter of Vidhi Marg or mixed bhakti, so no need for that, just by this path, you'll get the goal directly. So it's the best we could do with that one. Sorry. Okay, any other questions anyone wants to ask?
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. Yeah, I just want to confirm, when you said that, we cannot accommodate prema in this sadhaka body.
The higher stages of prema.
The higher, yeah, that's what I wanted to confirm. Because there's the initial prema, right? That comes right after bhava, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, the higher stages of that initial prema, that's what we cannot contain.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay. And then one other thing is, I've heard that, I know we always worship Radha Krishna in this Parakiya Bhav, but I heard that they do have a pastime where they did marry on the bank of some body of water or something, or something.
I've heard that pastime also. I don't remember all the details. It might be something that is mentioned in Srila Jiva Goswami's Gopal Champu.
Mm.
I think that story might come there. Maybe it's based on some other Purana. But it's highly controversial. So the Ananda Chandrika commentary, Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he's kind of counteracting. If just taking it point blank, he's kind of counteracting statements of Jiva Goswami and the Ujjvala Nilamani. So Jiva Goswami and the Ujjvala Nilamani, he apparently makes a case for the Swakiya, Bhava, and Braja Lila. And he is doing so. I guess the cultural context for him doing so is that people were like poo-pooing, tisk on the erotic nature of the Lila. So if you say that Krishna is having, a paramo relationship with other people's wives, this is not very good, tisk. And I guess there were moralists around who were causing a little bit of a ruckus. So Jiva Goswami was trying to present a conclusion that would be satisfying to them so they wouldn't create, trouble. And so he kind of appeared to exalt or to explain Krishna's pastimes with the gopis in terms of the Swakiya mood, saying that like these are Krishna's and eternal Shaktis, and therefore they're never separate from him, and they belong to him. Therefore, they can never be others. Therefore, Swakiya. He's giving some explanation like this, and Sri Vishwanath was like very disturbed by this. And so he saw that in the very outset of the commentary of Ujjvala Nilamani, like I think it's verse 11 of the first chapter, Jiva Goswami pens a statement that says, some of my statements are consistent and some of my statements are inconsistent. The consistent ones are my statements and the inconsistent ones are for others. So taking inspiration from that statement at the very beginning of Jiva Goswami's commentary, Sri Vishwanath goes on to refute any explanation of Krishna's Leela that favors the Swakiya explanation of the Leela. So I'm sure all these details are quite nuanced and intricate and requires a certain shastric wherewithal when engaging with it. Therefore, all this preparation stuff to study these sorts of things. But anyway, in any case, yeah, there are stories like that. And I don't know if those stories are coming from Supurana, which may be the case, some indication there. But I know Jiva Goswami has written things like that in Gopal Champu and in his commentary on Ujjvala Nilamani because of some sort of social situation at the time that caused him to make that adjustment.
To pacify the people.
Yeah, pacify.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's an aversion to the Madhurya Rasa because people think it will lead to immorality and whatever. Maybe there's a sense of how dare you think you can have such a relationship with God, and it's like I want what I want. I remember Vishwakarma Prabhu told us that Gaura Govinda Swami left this world of Vyasa-san speaking Jagannath, and it was inferred that Maharaj couldn't hold the ecstasy of love of God and gave up his body. Does it have to do anything that the advanced devotee can hold the bhava, that the advanced devotee can't hold the bhava? I mean, that is, neither here nor there. It's kind of, maybe it's possible. It's conjecture, so different devotees are going to explain his passing in different ways. And that could be an explanation that's true also, but it's also conjecture because we don't know, we don't have access to it. All we can say is abstractly, according to what we've just heard from Sri Vishwanath, and if we accept his words, that the higher states of prema cannot be held in the Sadhaka Rupa. You can get a very nice sense of this when you read Gaur Leela, especially Mahaprabhu and Puri in the last period of his life, the last 18 years where he never leaves Puri. And those descriptions are completely uncomfortable. Him like perspiring blood, his teeth falling out of like the, how do you say, the teeth becoming completely loose, all of them. And, his jumping in the air and all the joints come, apart, and then when he falls back to the ground, he's like literally like 18 feet, 20 feet long, because all his joints have separated from each other and they're being held together only by the skin, or him bringing in his arms so tightly that, he looks like a tortoise. This is some wild stuff. And I remember when I first read that in my second year as a devotee, I was like, what? This is the goal of life? And I think I remember mentioning this by accident probably in Kali Columbia years ago. And there was this devotee there, I think her name was Gloria. I think she might be initiated now. And she said, when you talk about prema, I get afraid. But I had a really good laugh from that because I was like, yeah, me too. Hearing about Mahaprabhu's, devotional ecstasies and Puri is just like, wow. So definitely the Sadhaka Rupa won't be able to handle that. That's just a little bit too much. So you need an appropriate spiritual sarup to sustain that level of ecstasy. There you have it. Was that true in Gaur Govinda Maharaj's case? Maybe not. Who can say? Okay, anything else anyone would like to say? Very interesting subject matter. Okay, we'll continue. I'll probably finish it tomorrow. In which case, I'd like to hear from the entirety of the book what people have heard or what they got out of it, if anything, inspiration or clarification, or I want to hear from others tomorrow, something, so prepare yourself. I don't like to do all the heavy lifting all the time when it comes to our studying little things like this. Hari Om Tat Sat, thanks a lot. See you all tomorrow. Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Raghav Chandrika Ki Jai. Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitai Go Premanandi. Hari Hari Bolo.